I think there's a sign of how much progress the Suns have made is that we organically had this podcast conversation for X amount of minutes, 30 something minutes, and Devin Booker hasn't really come up at
That's
this
a great
point.
point. Yeah, that's a great
How
point.
times have changed. I don't necessarily like having this discussion, but because I just have agendas left and right, apparently, it irked me at how many people just assumed that Chris Paul was Phoenix's most valuable player last year. And I know that we've actually had this discussion in the past. I know you guys have talked about it on the Timeline podcast in the past. I'm asking you to scold the national media once more, is what makes, not even long term, because that's obvious, but what makes Booker like immediately the most valuable player to this team?
I just think he draws so much attention, and that's like the most important thing. That's one of those things that you might not see on the stat sheets. He's also one of the only players, we talked about it, that actually puts rim pressure, like actual pressure on the rim on this entire team. Chris Paul's not doing that anymore, and you need him to do that kind of thing. But the conversation about Devin Booker has always been a disaster on the internet. It's become such a disaster, and now even more like post finals. Like I'm sort of understanding the way that other fans of other teams have felt after they lose the finals. If you look at sort of anything from ESPN or Bleacher Report that talks about the Suns, you look at the comments of that. Now it's like attacking.
You really went there.
I mean, it's true because the point is it's more of an audience than just the Suns fans that you and I interact with, Sam, and you see how they talk about and the blame that somebody like Devin Booker gets, and I just think he's always been underrated, and it's bizarre that you would think that it would have ended now, right? You would think that now they made the finals. Look, he had back-to-back 40-plus point games in the NBA Finals. He had a 40-plus point triple-double without Chris Paul in the Western Conference Finals. He had 8 threes against the reigning champions, Los Angeles Lakers, on their floor in order to eliminate them. 8 of 10, over 40 points against that team. You'd think that people would now...
Broken nose, too. That was not talked about enough.
Yeah, he broke his nose. He had a hamstring injury in the NBA Finals. And look, people can have whatever opinions they want about him, but it's become bizarre how much people are willing to just dislike and discount the things that Devin Booker does. And to me, if they're the type of people that point at specific stats, it's a problem with those stats more than it's a problem with Devin Booker himself. You have to rely on what you see, and what you see is that he's the most important player on the team, clearly.
Watching the attention that he draws when he just attacks has become like it's incredible to watch, especially over the past 2 seasons. And last year specifically, he was double teamed on a larger share of his possessions than Chris Paul was. And on the possessions in which he was double teamed, the Suns averaged 1.2 points per those possessions. And that's like, I'm not a fan of making these comparisons, but that would be the 4th most efficient offense in the league. Right. And so like the level of decision making that he has in those situations in general, and then just the attention he draws, has really become incredible. And you guys went really in depth on that internal development episode about his game. I think the easiest thing to point to is what if his 3-point shooting was a little bit higher, especially off the dribble. And I will say he does have the jump shot form of someone that I just assume if you didn't show me the percentages, I'd be like, that guy definitely shoots like 38, 40% from beyond the arc. I don't know if that's telltale of anything, but what would make Devin Booker an all-NBA shoo-in moving forward, Sam?
Man, it's a combination of, you mentioned the off-the-dribble shooting. I've mentioned the off-the-dribble shooting a million times. What a false friend that shooting form is, that any of us so-called shot doctors online actually think we can parse through those things, because I've been burned a million times. What would make Devin Booker an all-NBA shoo-in? Obviously, if the Suns retains their ability as like a 55-60 win team. And I think it's a combination of 2 things. 1, the off-the-dribble shooting. 2, being a little bit less predictable. We all know Devin Booker is a great mid-range shooter, but being a little bit less predictable, where sometimes he gets in trouble, not with his passing vision. His passing vision is quite good, and his playmaking talent is amazing. But getting into trouble when he gets into that mid-range area, when maybe he could just put a little bit more traditional rim pressure on the rim, push through the wall, so to speak, and try to get more attempts. Because that's kind of where the loose handle comes into play. Maybe he picks up some stupid turnovers that he shouldn't get by virtue of kind of being predictable in that area of the court. So I think a little more rim pressure plus a little better off the dribble shooting is maybe a 30-point per game campaign for Devin Booker. And if he gets there, yeah, he's an all-NBA shoo-in, as long as the Suns are good.
Can you just make the case for also more touches? Because I know you know the stats, and I'll just I guess break it down from my perspective. What could make him an all NBA guard is more touches, and just that. I think.
So I think the thing I think the thing is yes, more touches, but you have to present a better argument for where those touches are coming from. Are they coming from Chris Paul? Because Chris Paul ran a really good offense last year. I don't know if you noticed. Like, I don't want the conversation to become, yes, Devin Booker's amazing, and this is why we're disrespecting Chris Paul and what he did for the Suns. You know?
No, I don't think that the conversation has to come from that. But if you just make the comparison from the fact that, like, Donovan Mitchell had almost 50% more touches than Devin Booker did last year.
True.
Just on a per touch basis, that stat alone is remarkable if you just look at it from that perspective alone.
For Dan's listeners who don't know, Devin Booker has led the NBA in the most points scored per touch 2 seasons in a row, higher than guys like Kevin Durant, higher than guys like LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, you name it. Most efficient player in the NBA on a per touch basis, 2 years running.
And if you just increase those touches, this is the whole conversation about when players sacrifice for good teams. If you just increase those touches, I think more attention would come his way. It doesn't necessarily automatically make the team better, because the best offenses are offenses that understand how to move the ball and have the most good players capable of finishing at the end of those plays. So it's not an automatic thing as far as making the team better. But I think if he just did more in this offense, if they relied on him more, that would bring more attention his way. I just don't know that it would be great for the Suns.
So my suggestion would be, give me more Devin Booker as the de facto point guard lineups, which just don't happen. Last year, he was technically the point guard for under 20 possessions, and that feels like a way that could, like you said, maybe giving him like more looks than that could technically hurt the Suns' offense. But I'm at the point where it's like, if CP3 is going to be off the floor anyway, you're really kind of only infringing upon certain campaign minutes in those situations. So I would like to see more of that look, and I think that would help him gain. I don't necessarily think he definitely doesn't need to make any material changes to his game to be an all-NBA shoo-in. But if you're talking about getting him more touches, that sort of feels like a more organic way that you could up his volume.
Not to mention, the more that Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges especially are comfortable handling the ball, some of the issue we've seen with that in the past is this idea of playing, Rockets Harden ball to an extent of just, is Devin Booker really the level of playmaker where you want him handling everything, and then giving him a bunch of wings who, yes, they're switchable, yes, they hit threes, but they're afraid to put the ball on the floor. It really doesn't feel like a very dynamic offense. If you put Devin Booker as the point guard, with Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges, and Cam Johnson around him, 3 switchable as hell wings who hit threes, and 2 of the 3 of them are very comfortable putting the ball on the floor, you're doing it in a way now that you're not setting them up to fail. And maybe that wasn't always true in the past. So, I think you're right, Dan. I would like to see it.
The Suns also have Landry Shamet now. I mean,
it's true.
It's not this massive change as far as the offseason goes, but like that is another guy that's capable of playing off the ball with Devin Booker. But it also should be said that Cameron Payne shoots like 45% on catch and shoot threes. Like, he's capable of playing off the ball with Devin Booker as well, and as a secondary playmaker, which did happen quite often in those lineups. But I do think that the Suns can experiment with Devin Booker as the quote unquote point guard without necessarily forcing him to play with just Cameron Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, lineups like that. They can still have another playmaker on the court, whether that be Landry Shamet, who obviously not a point guard, but capable of doing some things with the ball, or even still with Cameron Payne, who is a great catch and shoot 3-point shooter, but also can still attack if the closeout is late. So, I agree with you, Dan, that I think he can do more there. And look at the assist numbers, just that alone. They went down dramatically last year playing with Chris Paul because he sacrificed. That's really where it came from.